Alright everyone, we are going to be starting our lesson on creating custom brushes in Photoshop. For our success criteria here, we have I can identify and utilize different brush settings. I can edit a default Photoshop brush to create my own custom brush. And I can design my own custom Photoshop brushes for painting. So we are going to start off in Photoshop. We're going to look at the brush settings panel. And honestly, before we even get there, we are going to talk about the brush tool itself. So, brush tool, over in your toolbar, it's the one that looks like a paintbrush. Brush tool, not to be confused with the history brush tool or the art history brush tool or the mixer brush tool or the color replacement tool. We just want the good old-fashioned brush tool, the one that looks like a paintbrush. I'm gonna give myself a new layer. Alright, so let's take a look at how we can change brush settings. First, and usually the easiest place to look, is going to be on our control bar here at the top. This controls different settings depending on the tool that you have selected. So with the brush tool selected, we have the tool presets, which we don't have any at the moment, that's fine. We have the brush tip shape, so hard round. We can adjust the size and the hardness, which is how hard or how fuzzy the edges are. Our mode is going to be blending mode. We're just going to leave it on normal. Opacity is how opaque or how translucent the brush is. At 100, it's 100%. 45, 45%. Flow is going to be how much quote-unquote paint flows out of your brush when you use it. 100% versus 50% versus 10%. For these exercises, we're going to leave both the opacity and the flow at 100% and leave the mode on normal. Smoothing we'll talk about another time. So, let's look at our brush settings. If I go to Window and I go to Brush Settings, you will see that it pops open our Brush Settings panel. Here we go. Zoom in on that. All right. Oh my goodness. Okay, so our brush settings panel is a pretty big, chunky panel. It's got a lot of options, a lot of brushes, a lot of checkboxes. We're going to learn about what each of these does or does not do, depending on what we need today. So we are going to go over brush tip shape, shape dynamics, scattering, texture, wet edges, build up, and smoothing. There are other options here, of course, but we're not going to cover those today. So let's examine the settings for the hard round default brush. If we take a look at the brush tip shape, which is the default panel here, you will see that our default hard round brush is a size of 50, an angle of 0, and a roundness of 100, a hardness of 100 with a spacing of 5. So size, that's going to be how many pixels in diameter our brush is. 100 pixels, 15 pixels, pretty straightforward. You can check and see if a brush is flipped on the X or Y axis. This will make more sense when we talk about the angle. So let's change the angle of the brush tip. Right now we have an angle of 0 degrees, which means that our brush is perfectly round. But if I adjust the angle, let's say 90 degrees, our brush is still round. Now, why would that be? Well, because it's a circle, and no matter how many times I rotate the circle, it's still a circle. Yes, thank you. So let's talk about roundness. What if I put this to 50%? Now I have a 50% roundness. Now changing the angle makes a difference. At 90 degrees, it's pointing upwards. You can also change the angle by grabbing this triangle here. Flipping X and Y will flip the direction that the angle is placed at. So it's a negative 34 degree angle, but if I flip it on the X, now it's that way. If I flip it on the Y, it goes back. This makes a lot more sense with more complicated brushes, and we're not going to use this very much. Finally, we'll talk about the hardness. So I'll bring my roundness back to a hundo and my angle back to 0. At 100% hardness, no fuzzies on the edges. 0% hardness, it's all fuzzy on the edges. This is even more obvious the larger your brush gets. Hardness is how fuzzy or how hard the edges of your brush are. Just real quick, I'm gonna clear that. All right, spacing. Spacing is how far apart each individual stamp of your brush tip is. So right now they're only 5% spaced. So close together that you can't tell. If I increase the spacing, you will notice that you can definitely tell that there is a change in spacing. Polka dots rather than a straight line. So if we look at it, less spacing, smoother edge, and then as it gets spaced out more and more, they're further and further apart. All right, so that is going to be it for looking over the hard round default brush. The hard round default brush does not have any of these other brush setting options. It is just an adjustment to the brush tip shape. This is the most basic of basics. You're controlling the size, the hardness, the angle, the roundness, and the spacing. Go ahead and start creating our own brushes. So our instructions say we need to create a new 500 by 500 pixel canvas. So we're going to go over to here. I'm going to start off by turning that to pixels, and then I'm going to adjust that to 500 by 500. I'm not worried about the resolution or any of the rest of this because we're only using it temporarily. I am just gonna leave this like that and then hit create. All right, here is my canvas. We are going to create 3 new layers and name them crosshatch, watercolor, and splatter. 1, 2, 3. Crosshatch, watercolor, and splatter. And we're going to save the file as custombrushes-canvas.psd. Inside this file, we are going to be designing the brush tips to create our 3 custom brushes today. When we are done, they're going to look like this. We're going to make a splatter brush, a watercolor brush, and a crosshatch brush. So let's start with our splatter brush. We are going to begin by selecting our hard round brush and the settings, brush settings. I'm going to pop this out so we can see it, are as follows. We are going to make the size 20 pixels and the spacing anywhere from 25 to 75%. I'm going to put mine at 60. Now we're going to go into some new options that we did not discuss with the hard round brush before. Let's start with shape dynamics. In the shape dynamics, we're going to change the size jitter to 100%. Now, if we take a look at our brush preview here, you will see that each of our brush tip prints or stamps, if you would like to call them that, is now a different size as you go through. And if I draw with this right now, you will see that rather than there being a single circular symbol repeated over and over again, there is a circular symbol that is repeated, but the size is changing. That is what the size jitter does. It randomizes the sizes of each brush tip as you create them. Minimum diameter is going to decide the smallest that your size jitter will go. We want our minimum diameter to be 25%. So we want the smallest of our dots to be no smaller than 1/4 of the size of the full dot circle. This is how we prevent having teeny tiny little dots that are impossible to see. All right, let's talk scattering. Scattering does what it says. It says here that we're going to set our scatter between 300 and 700%. I'm going to put mine at 550. Scattering scatters your brush tip. Now it's kind of all over the place. All right, so here is my splatter brush. Now, in order to save these settings so that I can keep this brush, I'm going to go down to the bottom right hand of my brush settings panel and click this Create New Brush button. It's a square with a plus sign in it. Now it's going to ask me to name the brush. This says we're going to name it Splatter, S-P-L-A-T-T-E-R, 20. We add the 20 on there because we are going to capture the brush size in preset, which means that every time you click this brush, it is going to start off at 20 pixels in diameter. That doesn't mean that you can't change the size. It just means that that's what the default size is going to be. We also want to make sure that include tool settings is checked. That way all the work that we just did in here is saved to the brush. And we don't need to include color because we did just use black. But if you were creating a brush to do a specific thing, like be a leaf or a flower, you might want to set it to a specific color and have it stay that color. In most cases, though, you design your brushes in black and white, and they can be made into any color you need them to. I'm going to click OK, and now if I go over to my brushes, you will see down here at the very bottom, that I have a Splatter 20 brush, and it's just in my brushes. If I go up here, it's here as well. So there's our first brush, Splatter 20. If I clear that out, that's my splatter brush. All right, that's splatter done. Let's move to watercolor. I'm just going to hide the splatter layer. For our watercolor brush, we are going to begin with our good friend, the hard round. And we are going to go to our brush settings. And we're going to make some adjustments. Under brush tip shape, we want our size to be 50 pixels and our spacing to be at 10%. You might not be able to tell a huge difference with the spacing right now, but you will in a little bit. We go to our shape dynamics, make sure that's checked. Our size jitter, about 25%. And our angle jitter, below minimum diameter, angle jitter is going to be 25%. Now, if size jitter randomizes the size, then you could probably guess that angle jitter randomizes the angle, and that is correct. We've got a little bit of size difference and a little bit of angle difference. That creates this kind of lumpy effect, kind of like paint. And then let's go to our scattering. Scatter 100. Just enough so we've got a nice thick bunch of these scattered bits. Now we want to check the box that says wet edges. There are no settings for wet edges. It either is or it isn't. Let's look at the difference without wet edges and with wet edges. If I go over it a couple of times, you will see that with wet edges, we have a translucent quality. We're going to go ahead and check smoothing. And there you go. There is our watercolor brush. Down to the bottom right, we're going to call it watercolor 50. Make sure capture brush size and preset is checked. Include tool settings is checked. Click OK. Okay, for this last one, we're going to do something a little different, but we're going to start off in the same way. Get your hard round brush, open your brush settings, go to your brush tip shape. Now, we want to start off with a hard round brush that is anywhere from 5 to 20 pixels. I'm going to do 15. Make sure I'm on my crosshatch layer, and the instructions say Draw 5 to 12 parallel lines. So I'm going to draw 5 to 12 parallel lines. They don't need to be straight. They don't need to be perfect. That's close enough. Okay, this is going to be my brush tip shape. What I need to do is I need to tell Photoshop that this is what I want my brush tip to look like. So we're going to go to Edit, down to Define Brush Preset. And as you can see here, it takes everything on my canvas that is black and turns it into a brush. The brush is going to be at the exact size that it already is on the canvas, and you can call it crosshatch. Now, I'm going to clear this out. If I click, now I've got a crosshatch brush. But it's not exactly what we need, right? Because it's just a stamp that's going over and over again. I'm not actually getting a crosshatch, I'm just getting lines. So let's edit our brush settings so that we can get a cool ink style crosshatch brush. So make sure that you have your crosshatch selected. Alternatively, you could name that hatch, because I suppose it's not a crosshatch unless it's crossing. We are going to go to our brush tip shape, set the size to 100, set the spacing to 100, next page. We are going to go to Shape Dynamics. Set the size jitter anywhere from 20 to 30. I'm going to do 20. Set the angle jitter anywhere from 20 to 50. We'll do 38. Now we're going to go to scattering. Make sure that we have both axes selected. Doesn't look like it's done anything yet, but it will. We want to scatter anywhere from 80 to 150%. If I do not select both axes, it will only scatter in one direction. So I want both axes. 80 to 150. Now, here's where things get interesting. We want to set the count of our scatter from 5 to 10. So right now, it's a 1. 1 brush tip at a time. As I increase my count, I have more than 1. Now they are overlapping. Now we have a crosshatch. We're going to go ahead and go down, new brush, and we're going to name this crosshatch 100. Capture brush size, include tool settings, and hit OK. Now that you have your 3 brushes, you can download the Custom Brush Practice template and fill in the Splatter 20, Watercolor 50, and Crosshatch 100 squares with your brush. Then you're just going to export it as a PNG and turn it in. And that's going to be it for this lesson.